let me tell you a little more about Emily Taylor. So she runs Teeny Big and helps nonprofits drive engagement by focusing on the user experience. So for me, Emily and Teeny Big are kind of synonymous with the term human-centered design because everything that I know about it comes from her. She's also my colleague on the board of directors of the Association of Consultants to Nonprofits, and we have some of our other ACN colleagues here too, which is always exciting. So, Emily, you teach us.
Let's unmute. Excellent. Thank you for that introduction, Randy. And I'll just give a little background on my experience. I was an industrial designer for most of my career path, which means I helped design products and packaging did that through a consumer lens. We wanted to figure out, why do people pick things up off the shelf? What makes them, fall in love with an object or purchase it again, and their experience with it. But really my heart has always been a nonprofit space. I've always volunteered for various organizations. So I had the fortunate opportunity to do a for-profit to nonprofit pivot about 4 years ago. So I've been taking a lot of those learnings from my experience there and translating them for the nonprofit space. And so I say that, I know not all of you are in nonprofit, so I definitely can think through both sides of that coin and what some of the differences are. But I've put together a few slides that just walk through why human-centered design is important. So let me share my screen. I like to do our full screen mode. So I guess since it's a small group, if anyone wants to unmute themselves, does anyone know, have any thoughts or ideas about what human-centered design is?
Working collaboratively.
That's a good one.
I always thought it was about usability and anthropology.
Yes, that's also part of it. And was someone else going to be talking? Or was there some?
Oh, that was me. The way you've described it before, I actually don't. It's one of the things I wanted to. I don't know what the difference between that and like asset-based development is. So I'd be curious. And there's the cat again. Sorry.
I always welcome cats to my presentations.
Yes. So to me, it's similar to what we do in community asset-based community development. But again, because I know it all from you, I do think about it from because you always start with the packaging and user experience perspective. So
yeah,
learning.
There's definitely a lot of similarities. I'm not as familiar with all the details of asset-based community building, but I think you're going to see a lot of similarities. I post this picture up when I talk about it because I feel like a lot of people have been to workshops where there's lots of post-it notes and ideas, and while that is part of human-centered design, is being collaborative and thinking through new ideas, it's not everything. And so I wanted to walk you through first why nonprofits need human-centered design. And really, I believe it's because we're human, and it's how do we get through some of the weeds of people, because we're not robots. We don't act the same way when given the same situation every time. We're always processing lots of complex thoughts, and this is really important right now with the pandemic, because people are getting different major pieces of information on a daily and weekly basis, and so the way people make decisions can change and really be unpredictable. So how do we have a process to help us work through some of this? So I go through this by talking about 3 reasons to be thinking about human-centered design, and this is not solely for nonprofits, but one reason is, I have 3 reasons. So the first one is this move towards bottom-up versus top-down organizational strategy. So if you think of history and how societies have had kings and queens, corporations have had big, very bold leaders with strong ideas, and everyone falls in line, and does what their vision is. you've really seen over the last couple of decades this move to bottom up and listening to, you know, the people that are on the ground and doing the work. How can they be incorporated into some of the bigger decisions that are made, so it isn't always just a top-down strategy? And one really great category that comes to mind is healthcare. If you think about, you know, maybe 20 years ago, you go to a doctor and, you know, they really had the authority. The doctors, you know, go to school for a long time. They know everything about medicine. They tell you to, you know, take this number of pills, get these shots, and you would do it. But I think as people build more voice and have more say, well, we've started to realize that there's a lot of other things that go into some of those outcomes. And so really thinking about some of the emotional state and the knowledge that patient has, you know, they might be scared. They might not understand the treatment that they're being asked to take. They might be skeptical of certain things. And so it's moved to this awareness that there is input that the people who are essentially at the bottom of the organizational structure that could go into a treatment. So thinking about, how do you talk to the patient and make them feel comfortable? How do you explain things in a language that they can understand? How can you create an environment at a doctor's office that makes people feel comfortable? And these are all done by listening to the patients and getting that feedback. So it's not just the doctor's voice involved. Another area is the curse of knowledge. And this comes from people just being, you know, especially in nonprofit sector, I find people are just such experts at whatever sector they're in. So, but when you think about the more you know about a certain topic, the harder it is to explain it to somebody who doesn't know about it. So as you're talking to people who have a lot less knowledge about that area, you're going to run into challenges. And so I have to give the example of, like, you know, a global warming advocacy organization might understand everything that's going on in the Arctic and the atmosphere. And some of those topics are so big that if you imagine, you know, a parent at home really trying to deal with childcare and figuring out where to spend their money, they might not quite get the scope and scale of the weeds that you're in dealing with that problem day to day. And so there needs to be some translation to understand how to speak to people at the point they're in their knowledge in order to get that idea across. And then the third area that I find really important is unknown motivators. And this is a really, I think, key part of human-centered design that, Anissa, I'll be curious to hear if you're, you know, the work that you do does this kind of process. But in unknown motivators, there's often, you know, there's the goals of your organization, and then there's what people say and do. And so if you've ever, you want to try to figure out what will motivate them to do, you know, donate to your organization, to attend your event, what will motivate them to do the thing that will help you reach your goal. And some of the problems are, sometimes when you go ask people, if you've ever had this where you do a survey and people give you feedback and then you do that exact thing and no one actually reacts to it. You know, just as an example, you know, you might survey for a museum and, you know, people, you ask them what would make them come. They say, oh, a free ticket would be great. And then you give them that and they don't show up. So the reason this is important is because people can't always articulate what motivates them. So what we do in human-centered design is bring in new ideas, and we look outside of our sector. We look at what's working in other places, but we also just get creative and bring lots of people together and get new perspectives to kind of pool in those ideas. And then we go out and test some of those ideas that we think might work. And that's where you can really find items that, or find actions you can take that will actually work by testing out certain strategies, certain messaging with people and seeing what they react to in a testable scale. Then you can start to build that up into a full program or activity. So just to kind of cover the process, this is sort of a traditional process of how people problem solve. You have your problem, you find a solution, you execute it, and then you go back and see if it worked, you evaluate it. But what we're doing in the human-centered process is we're really first empathizing with people, redefining the challenge, coming up with ideas, and then prototyping and testing. And the difference is that we're bringing people's perspective, that bottom up part of the process. There's several points along this process that bring in those points of view so that we can check and see. And it's a little more like a scientific experiment than just going straight forward and just replicating something else that worked in another place. So I want to give you some examples of work that I've done. So the first is experience mapping. And this is a way we can, it's a tool that we use in human-centered design to help better understand some of that empathizing with a user. So I worked with the League of American Bicyclists. It's a national bike advocacy organization, and they were really trying to figure out how to diversify their local training. They train people across the country to ride bikes, and they were just not, they really had efforts. They wanted to diversify the attendees for that and get a broader range of people cycling, and that just wasn't happening. So what I did is talk to people who were doing the training around the country and really got to know better about what that process was for bringing people into a class and what was happening to people along in their mindset along the way. So we're looking for not just functional things like they had trouble signing up to a web page, but also emotional things like were they feeling not welcome or confused about certain things. So this is showing a empathy map, and the dots are representing different touch points along that process. So, promoting the cycling class, learning about the cycling class, signing up, attending, and then going out in the world and cycling. And as I started to talk to people, I put some of the positive things people were saying about those touch points on the top and negative at the bottom. And you could see as people went further, deeper into this program, there were just more opportunities for feeling not included, for having difficulty following the information, for not having the support network in order to get on a bike and move on beyond the class. And so what this really helped us is, this is part of that define element of human-centered design, is we redefined the problem. So rather than just going in and saying, how can we diversify our training programs? We changed it to a how might we statement of how might we help a more diverse audience feel more included in our training programs. And it's a small change, but it really helps make a difference for the next step when you're trying to come up with ideas and how to solve this challenge. And then I'm also going to show an example of prototyping and testing. This is with the High Speed Rail Alliance, again, a national organization focusing on promoting high-speed rail. They were looking to find ways to connect more with their California members and action takers, because there's a big project going on that had some potential for losing its funding. So what I did is I talked to a wide variety of people within their membership and within this sector, and talked to them about why high-speed rail was important to them, what issues they thought were important. And I was really listening for language that they used and ways to things that they were passionate about that motivated them. And for the prototyping part, I created these just mock imagery ads, as well as some headers that really used the words that I was hearing and the issues that I was hearing and brought them to life in a few different ways. And then what we're able to do with this is put it out in a wider test. So we sent out a survey, really looking for feedback on what what did people think about when they saw these different messaging ideas? And what we found was we got this feedback that, you know, people, there were different aspects of different ones that resonated with people, you know, not only in how they comprehended them, but also that gave them the information they want and connected to the issue that they felt strongly about. So we're able to use this and build a strategy for developing more messaging, developing the landing pages that would really help communicate this to people. And so we knew that these were messages that resonated with them. All right, so that's all I have on human-centered design. I really would like to open this up for discussion, but I'll just do my quick plug that, you know, I help nonprofits turn lackluster followers into passionate supporters using this human-centered design process. And I do that a lot with collaborative facilitation, engagement experiences, as well as organizational experiences, and thinking about users as your internal staff. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And Randy, I'm not sure if you have some questions or if we should just take them from the...
Yeah, if anybody wants to share a question, I'll share one thing that is the most random example of the bottom-up approach, but I did think about you when this happened. Sometime last year when it was safe to travel, and I was in a hotel room, and the bathroom was tiny, so much that, like, if you open the door, it would knock the shower mat, like the bath mat towel, out of the way. Like, they couldn't both be going at the same time, and it was annoying. But I thought, you know who this is really annoying for is the housekeeping staff, because they're having to replace this towel every day because it's like crumpled up on the floor, and nobody has ever asked them about bathroom design, I'm sure. So I know that's not like top of mind to you when you talk about human-centered design, but that's the time that I thought, oh my God, somebody has designed this who has absolutely no idea what it's like on a functional level.
Well, and I think what's important about that is it really stood out to you. And, you know, I would imagine the hotel staff is probably not thinking about their bathroom floor towels too often.
Yeah.
But if it's important to, you know, their customers, it's something they should be thinking about.
It's annoying to me, but I can't even remember which hotel it was. So clearly it wasn't an experience buster. Anissa, was there anything that you wanted to add about the different approaches? You had mentioned that earlier.
No, I mean, I think this presentation more clearly laid out the similarities and differences. I think when you look at asset-based community development, you're spending a lot of time kind of identifying what needs to be done, and your approach comes in more when you're actually getting to the doing.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yes. Any other questions people have, or just thoughts? I feel like I usually present this and I don't always get to have feedback on you know, what people took from it.
Yeah, Emily, I'm really interested in this. So, Michelle, Randy, there's 3 journalists in this room, because I was a journalist at the BBC for a decade, and I now work as a coach for people who own their own businesses. And I'm fascinated because we never use this term as journalists and organizations, as television creators, but actually you have your audience in mind all the time. And now as a coach, you see the problem from the person's perspective first, rather than going in with this idea of, here is my framework that applies to everybody. This idea of people own the change that they help create. And I love the term human-centric design, because I came into this thinking, oh my God, this is all about like architecture or UX and UI. And actually it has a much broader kind of ideological application. So thank you for sharing, Emily.
You're welcome. Yeah, I've always struggled a little bit with the term design, because I do think it gives people a different first impression about the topic. But you know, I also, as a designer in the past, I think I also have a very broad sense of the word design, and it doesn't, you know, I do see it more as different ways to problem solve versus just make things pretty.
I loved the how might we statement, or rather repositioning the question that way. That I don't know, that jumped out at me as something that I think I can start using just on a daily basis. What was that specifically? I think it was going from how to make a more diverse group to,
First program to how might we make people feel more welcome,
yeah,
something of that sort. And that's the how might we is a very human-centered design or design thinking statement, but it's pretty amazing when you rephrase your questions that way, because it opens up possibilities in your mind, and it also, it's not very authoritative. It really helps, kind of open up this question to everybody in the room. And you don't have to be an expert. It's just like, how might we create a sugary, salty snack?
right. It's a mix of popcorn and chocolate every day, which I love that you treat yourself to that, Anissa. That's amazing.
Unfortunately, the chocolate I have every day. I need to make the switch and do the popcorn every day and the chocolate occasionally. It's difficult times, so that's how I'm
Yeah,
getting.
you get a free pass.
Nothing counts right now. Does anybody have any other last thoughts before we wrap up and everybody can get back to their days?
I was just thinking that this is so relevant right now, as I know I've been on a lot of webinars and calls where, nonprofits are realizing like, wow, we need to start involving our community in some of these programs that we're creating. It's like they're creating them in-house and they don't have the actual input that's coming in from the community that is so important. So I'm hoping to see that this will be more prevalent. I know with one of my clients, they already are doing that, which is great. But yeah, I think right now is such an important time for concept.
It is, and I know it sometimes feels like it's really hard right now because everything's virtual and we don't have a lot of those in-person connections to people. But and the flip side, I think there's also an advantage of people are more available now, and you can, it doesn't have to be a 2-year wide-reaching survey. It can just be reaching out to people in small ways through social media, through phone calls.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. I think people have more time to put into surveys and think about their answers than usual. I mean, especially since no one's commuting. I mean, that's hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Get that back,
Well, I know this was a big concept that I asked you to squeeze into just a few minutes, Emily. So thank you for doing that. I definitely got an even better idea of what you do, and I've heard you talk about it a couple times. So this was very cool, and I hope others learned from it too. I did share Emily's website in the chat. I'm also going to put a link to the upcoming coffee breaks if you want to join for others. You can also you can see videos of Lydia when she talked to us about social media marketing design. You can see James, who told us the history of Boys Town a couple weeks ago. So fascinating. It's my neighborhood, and I had absolutely no idea some of the stuff that had happened here and is still happening here. We also have Jeff Jones, who has been a past guest, and there's a video of his talk on there, and he's an upcoming guest as well. He's going to teach us again how to relax. And Anissa, did you have something else to say?
I do. I saw this article yesterday that with all of the DEI, people are trying to rename Boys Town, and I'm curious what James feels about that.
Yeah, James.
Sorry, and this is very brief. Can you say that again?
With all of the let's be more diverse and equitable and inclusive people, not that it's a bad thing. I know I came off very, but people are trying to rename Boys Town now, and I was curious what you thought about that.
Well, you should go and watch my talk, because in fact that is the entire theme of that.
Excellent.
So this idea
I will do that then. Perfect.
Yeah, actually,
Recommended.
how hostile queer communities are to women, to people of color, to people who are not cis white gay men. So I talk a lot about that in that 50 or so.
I will check it out.
Cool. Thank you again, Emily, for all the great information, and thank you all for being here. I always enjoy these, so I like when a few people I like come and hang out for a little bit. So thanks for joining me for coffee.
Thanks, Randy.
All right, bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.